Hey everyone, Mr. Toast here. Just a quick thank you from Mikey and myself. We appreciate the support you have shown and are excited to be bringing back new episodes of the podcast. We hope you'll join the Discord link in the description below and enjoy the episode.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Mixed Media with Mr. Rager and Mr. Toast. And if you got the going live notification, everybody knows that this is a Black Friday BOGO special here. Me and Keegan have both worked retail for a long period of our adult lives, as
Yep,
we will kind of be sharing a little bit of our
begrudgingly
experiences.
sharing.
Yeah, begrudgingly sharing some of our experiences while we are covering Clerks 1 and 2 just in time for the Black Friday season. Um, and I also wanted to talk about our next big project before we get into the actual podcast topic of this episode. After a lot of deliberation and thinking and kind of like going back and forth on what our next major thing was going to be for the podcast post Attack on Titan, I think that we finally settled on an idea, and we have talked in depth before about starting to cover directors. And we think that with Project Gimme Shelter, for some reason Keegan wanted to call it Project
That
2025,
is not
and I was
true.
like,
You
"Oh,
put that in the
that
notes, it's
name."
not true.
I was like, "That name was taken." I was like, "You don't want to associate with that, Keegan." I was like, but no, I'm kidding. But it is called Project Gimme Shelter, and we will be covering every single one of Martin Scorsese's feature-length films that aren't documentaries. Those are the two caveats that I've included. um, we won't be looking at his short films, and we won't really be looking at any of his documentaries that he's done, because he has released 18 documentaries as well as everything else that he's done. So he has quite the filmography. We are anticipating to be starting on this project very soon. We have a cool little teaser poster that we're going to be posting around on the different Discords and the Twitter and everything to get everybody ready for it. But I was just really excited about this idea, and I wanted to share it with you guys.
Yeah, depending on how much work I want to put on this, I might make an actual like trailer. We'll see though.
That's fair. So going into Clerks, this was kind of a spur of the moment decision for us to cover this duology. I'm not gonna acknowledge the third one. You
We
can't
don't
make me.
we don't need to talk about it. We saw the trailer. So, that's about as much as we need.
I have seen the third one. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but Clerks is very special to me, especially somebody who has, like I said, pretty much the only job I've had in my adult life has been retail work. So seeing Clerks and Clerks 2 in some aspects, it really feels like a mirror. And I think that that's something that that really kind of inspired us to cover this as our next episode for this new season.
Yeah, a large reason that the idea even came about was we were sitting down talking on Discord and we were thinking, what do we want to do next? And we were kind of talking about like what's been going on recently, which Mikey was talking about picking up a second job recently here. So I was kind of like, why don't we talk about Clerks since we both have so much retail experience? And it kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah, we ended up watching both for the first two Clerks films. We had thought about doing the third one briefly, but I was like, I explained some of the plot to Keegan, and I was like, I feel like we could get a much better discussion just going into the first and second one. Uh, that being said, though, I did want to kind of give a little bit of an introduction to Kevin Smith and the View Askew universe. So, for those of you unfamiliar, the View Askew universe, also sometimes referred to as the Jay and Silent Bob universe, is this universe that Kevin Smith has kind of created with his earlier films, and now he's kind of gotten back into it. But they follow this very similar group of characters throughout all of them. There's the three Clerks films. There are two Jay and Silent Bob movies, a Mallrats film that ties in. I do believe Chasing Amy is also a part of that universe. Uh, Dogma, and I might be missing one more because I was just doing that off the top of my head. But they are all like somewhat connected, kind of like how the MCU is, where some characters appear, but you don't necessarily have to view all of the films to get like one of them. Like you could just pull one of them. Like if you just watch the first Clerks, or if you just watch Mallrats or one of the Jay and Silent Bob movies, you'd be fine. You don't need the context of everything that comes before it, but it is a connected universe. Um, that Kevin Smith started with this one. Very low budget. Came out in 1994, and it made the film festival circuit. It was very big among other indie movies. Its budget. I need like a counter for like how many times I say I don't mean to do it, and I notice that I'm doing it now, and I'm like, fuck.
I think
But
it's just something that we do all the time and we don't really think about it. And now you're hyper focusing.
yeah, yeah, that's probably it. But like now I lost my fucking train. God damn it. I like threw something in the train tracks and I like completely derailed it.
Yep.
Oh, the independent film circuit. So it circled a lot, especially around Sundance and a lot of the big festivals, and it just kind of blew up the same way that Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs blew up, in the same way that a lot of these other smaller underground '90s directors were able to kind of make their movies known. And a movie like Clerks, if it came out today, would not be able to succeed at the box office at all.
No. Especially with
Uh,
the current climate of movies where pretty much the only things that are selling are your large, like huge movie projects. The smaller stuff isn't getting noticed, or like the stuff that's just adapting like a random book that was released like 4 years ago isn't doing anything.
yeah, all of those things are kind of falling by the wayside in favor of the bigger event movies. Um, but in the '90s, there was this opening for a lot of independent filmmakers to kind of make their voice heard, and a lot of what we consider the greats of like the modern era for directing, Quentin Tarantino, Kevin Smith, I'll throw him in there, sure. Among others, they appeared in the '90s because of that door that was open for them, and that's the only thing now that is kind of similar to that is A24 providing a doorway for directors to kind of be able to get a screen in these bigger theaters with a smaller budget, even though all of these event movies keep coming out and taking up everything else. Um, when looking at the first Clerks, because of that budget and because of how low it was, it's filmed in black and white, which honestly I think works for it like really
Yeah,
well.
it's actually kind of a nice what do you call it? Uh I don't know. It just suits the film, you know? It just works. It um kind of exemplifies that indie budget like aspect of it, but also it kind of makes the film feel more real in a way.
I agree, and especially the way it's utilized in the second one, which we'll talk about a little more later. But they use color as not just like a budgetary restriction in the second one. They kind of use it as a state of being in a way.
Yeah.
The way that the color fades in and out in the second film. But in the first one, the entire reason behind it was they quite literally couldn't afford to film it in color. Uh, then it's the same with a lot of the casting in the first film. There aren't a lot of big names. The biggest names in the first Clerks probably come from Kevin Smith and Jason Mewes, Jay and Silent Bob. The rest of the cast in the first Clerks, Randall and Dante, their actors, have not done much outside of this. They're not really recognized outside of this. at in Comic Cons and things like that whenever oh gosh, Dante O'Ha or what's his name? It's something O'Halloran. I don't think it's Dante
I
O'Halloran.
think it starts with a B. It's
Brian
Ryan.
O'Halloran.
Yeah.
He is almost always like signing Clerks stuff or like Jay and Silent Bob stuff. So pretty much everybody that was in the Askew universe early on, Jason Mewes, Brian O'Halloran, and Jeff Anderson as Randall Graves, they all really just kind of stuck to that for their career, and they all had other parts and things, but their most known roles for all of them was Clerks. So when we're looking at it, I don't really want to go into like the plot details, like scene by scene, but I wanted to kind of pull me and Keegan's experience from working in retail into the movie because there were quite a few things that we were like, yeah.
Yeah, there were several moments that stuck out. It's like that is like I've encountered that several times. Um, one of my favorites being part of the store is a video rental store, and somebody walks in and it's you have any new releases, and there's a new release sign right behind him on the wall. Like Mikey and I have both worked in a store that sells physical media like movies and stuff like that, and we're like, yeah, you walked right by it. It's right there.
Or the people come in with the question like, you guys got that movie with that guy that came out in like 1982? There were a lot of movies with a lot of men that came out in
Yeah.
1982.
Yep.
Like,
And you're just like, can you name like any of the actors or like part of the plot? And they're like, I think that one guy was. And it's like that. You're not helping me.
and every time I kind of watch this movie, like I relate to one of the two clerks a little bit differently, and I feel like I find myself relating to both of them, but in different ways. Like I kind of relate to Dante and his like where he's at in life and that kind of thing, but I also relate to Randall in that like not giving a fuck about anything and just like wanting to be done and like realizing that like this job is not that important, like it's not the epic end all be all that Dante thinks that it is at several points in both of the movies. Randall kind of realizes that like we're anybody can do our job. It's not that important, so why should I give a shit?
Right.
Um, One of my favorite scenes kind of exemplifying that is when the lady comes into the video rental store and she's got the two VHS tapes and she's like asking him questions about him and he's like, I don't know anything about either of those movies. I find it best to stay out of other people's affairs.
My favorite part's when she does the turnaround. She's like, well, what about these two? But she just turns around the same movies in hand. And he's like, yeah, those both suck. And she's like, you see, you're not even paying attention. They're the same movies. It's like, I don't appreciate your ruse.
Your cunning attempt to trick me, ma'am. I don't appreciate it. And that's the thing. Some of the acting in the first Clerks, I will admit, has not aged the best by any means. It's just very low budget. You could tell they probably didn't do a ton of takes for some of the scenes, especially with Jason Mewes as Jay. Some of his line delivery in the first Clerks isn't great. Uh, but the dialogue is written so well. It's very snappy, and all the ones that you can tell that can perform it extremely well, and the lines just slide right out of their mouths like super quick, right it back and forth at each other, and that continues into the second one too, I would say.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about like some of the other interactions, um, some of the things like obviously I can't relate to because I don't sell like milk and I've never like been in a store that sold those kind of things. But I also just really like the subtlety of some of the customer interactions from like them being on this scale of like kind of normal but like annoying to like utterly batshit insane because that is something that I can relate to
Yeah.
with having those like some customers that are like, they're kind of annoying, they come in, they bother you, But then you have the ones that are like, oh my god, this guy is a lunatic.
Yeah, my favorite one to draw to is like they have like the women that come in and they start looking through all the gallons of milk to try and find the one that won't expire for who knows how long.
The
Uh
milkmaids.
yeah, the milkmaids. We can draw like in our personal experience like resemblance to that with the people that would come in and they'd ask you about the same exact like movies and stuff. Like someone would come in and it's like, you got in this movie, and we're like, no, we don't. And then they come in like next week, like, did you get it yet? And we're like, no. I will you? Probably not. And they'll go to the same section where you would probably find it, and they browse through like maybe they got it and they're lying to me.
Yeah, like you're the one that's in the store all day, and then they're like, "Oh, are you sure?" "Yeah, I'm positive. Like I live in this place." And that's the other thing too that I really related to in Clerks was when we watched the first film, it was on a day where I got called in to work on a day that I was off, and the entire movie, there's this running gag where Dante keeps saying, "I'm not even supposed to be here today," because it was supposed to be his day off.
Yep.
So it just worked out so perfectly. I had watched it on a day that I was in fact not supposed to be there.
Yeah. I think every person that's ever worked in retail too, that's picked up a shift, like they can relate to that. Like it's the day that you pick up a shift when it is the most off the wall random bullshit that you're gonna see for that entire week.
Yeah, and it's like today of all days, like I wasn't supposed to be here. I was supposed to be at home, and that's the thing that some people have debated on the reality of Clerks and the relatability of it. But I think that no matter what retail setting you're in, I think that there's some piece of it that you can find relatable to you.
Yeah, I don't even think I think it's just restricted to retail. Like a lot of it is you can draw to retail, but there are some aspects of it too that can draw to everybody's regular day-to-day life, no matter what job you're doing.
I completely agree, and I think that that's what they were able to build on with the second movie, which we're going to be talking about here in just a couple minutes. How they kind of, and that's why I like the second one over the third one, and why I like this Kevin Smith sequel over other Kevin Smith sequels because he does kind of change it up a little bit and kind of provide a voice to a different crowd in a way, but he still doesn't lose the relatability to everyone else because he when he transitions to the food industry in Clerks 2, he's pivoting the audience towards, people who can relate to that, of course, people who've worked in the fast food industry, but still the interactions and the actual problems that the characters are having are still something that I think anybody can relate to regardless of like their occupation. So, Keegan,
Yes.
would you like to discuss the original ending that I told you about for Clerks before we start talking about Clerks 2?
Well, I think we'll have to discuss the original, or not the original ending, but the ending that we got, and then we can kind of talk about the original planned ending.
Okay.
So, as we get towards the end of the movie, we kind of have this moment with Dante and Randy where, they kind of get into it over something Randy did for Dante that probably shouldn't have done. But they kind of had this moment where Dante's like, not even supposed to be here today. He brings it up again. Randy's like, you say that like it's everybody else's fault. Like he trying to kind of tells him like, get over it. This is like what you're doing. uh this is the job. Like this is it. Then they kind of come to an agreement. They apologize to each other, clean up the store, and they close up. They go home for the night. That's the ending. And then in the original ending that they shot, which from what you told me did not screen well with anybody,
It did not.
uh the test screenings had them wrapping up, and there's a running joke throughout the movie where somebody would like walk through the door and they go, you guys open? And it's like, yes, we're open. uh the original ending had them leaving, and a guy comes up and Randy says, sorry, we're actually closed. and the guy ends up where he's wearing a ski mask, pulls out a gun, and shoots Randy, and the movie ends.
Or he shoots
Is it
Dante,
Dante?
not Randall. Yeah,
Okay.
Randall still leaves. It's Dante because that was like supposed to be the ultimate final irony on his day that he wasn't supposed to be
Yeah.
there. Is he dies for it,
Yeah.
which it's dark, but like I don't hate it per
I like it in
se.
concept. It would be very shocking though to go from like this kind of lighthearted movie that's got like grounded roots to having an ending that's so bleak.
It changes the whole context of the movie,
Yeah.
like, and especially for any kind of rewatch that you will ever do, it is a different movie with that ending entirely.
Yeah.
It is it is still a comedy, but with that ending, I get where he's coming from with including it, because especially with how he felt in his place in life, because he was a clerk and he was like, never gonna get a movie made, it's never gonna happen, I'm just gonna be stuck in this place forever. I kind of get that negativity of, oh yeah, that'd be perfect. Like on a day that I'm not supposed to be there, somebody comes in and fucking shoots me. That'd be
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
So I like that cynicism, but I get changing it to be like a more positive, just neutral ending.
Right. Plus it would change the entire course of a sequel as well.
Yeah, well, to be fair, again, before the 2000s, he really wasn't planning on doing like what he ended up doing. After the first Clerks, now that we've kind of discussed the ending, he built off of it and he did Chasing Amy and Dogma, and his career was building up, and he returned to the Askew universe with all those projects with Mallrats as well. But they were all original things, and he did Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, which was their first like feature length thing with them together. And then he decided to do his first sequel, which is Clerks 2. Um, First direct sequel, I will say, because I guess you could make the argument that Jay and Silent Bob is like a sequel to Mallrats or whatever, but
Yeah.
not really. It's just the same characters. But this was the first time Kevin Smith had kind of returned to a project, and this was one of the first times in his career that people had started to accuse him of selling out, which I had a note in our podcast notes about that, and he was like, what do you mean him selling out?" It's very interesting because in recent years he has definitely sold out, um, like literally, which we'll talk about in a second. But, he's always had these, like, kind of accusations in his career of that, of selling out because he, would touch horror for a few years or he would touch something new, and then he would return to the safety of, like, the Askew universe. But as I was telling Keegan, and I think Keegan would probably agree with me, I would say that he didn't sell out until the last, like, 4 years.
Based off of the IMDb page and like the Wikipedia page, yeah, I think so.
He, what makes me say that before, anybody gets, like, super up in arms about me being like, "Oh, he's a sellout." I know that's like a ooh, that's like a I don't know what the word is for it, like
Defamation, so kind
yeah,
of.
yeah, it's
It
being an
can be, or it
asshole,
could.
and
It's kind of just a comment that you say about somebody based on their career choices. So
yeah, I don't mean to be that negative about Kevin Smith, but he released a movie called Kilroy, and, Kilroy was here, and for those of you who haven't heard of it, he, released it as an NFT. And only 1,000 people were able to purchase and view this film. Also, within the span of 4 years, he released a sequel to Clerks, which is Clerks 3, a sequel to Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, which is Jay and Silent Bob Reboot, a planned Mallrats sequel, and all of them were crowdfunded. So that's the other cool thing.
Isn't there
Uh,
a plan for another Jay and Silent Bob movie as well?
yes, there is plans for another Jay and Silent Bob movie. It seems like he's kind of leaving horror behind and gonna just kind of focus on the Askew universe a little bit. But that's enough. Like, I guess being mean to Kevin Smith because we did like Clerks and Clerks 2, I
Yeah.
would say quite a
I
bit.
wouldn't even say like I'd say that some of the choices he's making currently aren't great, but I'd say what he's done for like smaller movies and stuff like that's still good. He still did do good stuff, you know,
Oh,
uh
for sure,
in his career. So it's just
especially in his
these
early
recent
career.
years he's made some questionable decisions, that's all.
Yeah, he's started to look more at things from like a financial angle, and I know there's a lot of people there. He had a lot of controversy around the He-Man series that came out on Netflix. I don't know if you had heard about that.
No, it didn't. What is it? It
Uh,
was like a reboot of the cartoon, wasn't it?
yes, and he had a major part in it, and there was a lot of controversy around some of the writing decisions and things that he had made for it. Um, and it's kind of that's been another kind of roadblock in his career was that series and a lot of the fallback that he got from it. He also I don't know if you remember this. This is a weird like pivot from the topic for just a second, but we are talking about Kevin Smith. Do you remember Comic Book Men?
No, I can't say that I
Did
do.
Okay, that was a show that would come on AMC. Here I'm gonna look it up real quick. See, it lasted 7 years. I hated it. It was a show that he did that was like, imagine like Pawn Stars, but they didn't buy anything,
Okay,
but only for like nerd stuff. And
interesting.
it's hosted by Kevin Smith. Basically, it's like he has a comic book store and with these guys working there and people bring in stuff like
Uh,
comics and stuff. Yeah,
okay,
that's the show. It's a
that's the
reality show.
okay.
It lasted like 7 years, but that was like what he did for like another really big part of his career. So he's had like such an odd life. But that would air. I remember I believe it was like they would air Walking Dead, Talking Dead, and then Comic Book Man on Sundays on AMC.
Hmm.
It was the triple feature. Like the night just got worse as you went on. But um yeah, that's sorry. I didn't mean to like go so off topic, but I was just thinking about that and like that show popped into my head for like the first time in a decade.
Right.
So we kind of already talked a little bit about like fast food and him moving into that with this movie, moving out of retail. And as we kind of discussed, fast food and retail are really not all that different.
There's
You're take
similarities here and there. I'd say fast food is definitely way more stressful, but
I would agree. I've never worked fast food and I would agree. Uh Similar kind of premise though. You're kind of taking orders from the public. You're working a lot with the public. If you're working register, you're dealing with the transactions, the money part of it. The big thing is you're dealing with large amounts of the public very quickly
yeah,
in bursts, and that is the big similar thing between retail jobs and fast food jobs. Because even working in nicer restaurants, sit down restaurants, you're dealing with the public, but you're dealing with a few people for like an extended period of time. Whereas in fast food or in retail, it's boom, you're in, you're out.
yeah.
You're going through the line at like McDonald's or KFC or Movies, which is the restaurant in Clerks 2, and you order your food. You want to get in, you want to get out, and it's the same with a lot of like smaller retail places, like especially mall jobs and things like that, in convenience stores. A lot of people just want to get in and get out,
Especially on Black Friday. There.
especially on
If
Black
you're
Friday.
working retail on Black Friday, you will be standing at a counter working sales for 3 hours straight and realize that you have been standing there for 3 hours straight Uh, Probably at some point you'll look down and it'll be like, oh shit, it's 4. Your shift started at like 8.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Speaking of which, this year, did I tell you what my hours are on Black Friday this year? That's insane.
17 hours between the two.
Yeah, I'm working 2 retail jobs, so I'm working 17 hours this Black Friday, so it's gonna be oh man, it's gonna be fun.
Yep.
I'm so excited for that.
This is the perfect opportunity for us to say, Red Bull, where's that
W
sponsorship at?
Yes, well, do we have a like, some kinda energy drink sponsor, don't we? Do we still have
Yeah,
that?
we don't talk about that.
Oh, do we still not have that?
No, we
We
do.
need it.
Let's be real. No one cares.
Well, here, I'll buy it.
No,
Where's
no,
the
no, you
link?
don't do that.
I need some, like, energy on my do they have the mixer, or is it all just, like, pre-made already?
It's like a powder. You mix it up.
See, I've actually been looking for that because I bring that water bottle to work every day. Is it, like we'll discuss this after.
Yeah. We're getting sidetracked.
We are getting, like, so heavily sidetracked. Do you wanna kinda talk a little bit about, like, where Clerks 2, opens and, like, why the transition to, fast food is made?
Yeah. So my probably my favorite part about the opening of Clerks 2 is it starts out very similar to Clerks 1, where we see Dante pull up um to the quick stop, unlock the gate, goes to roll it up. This time, instead of being jammed up with gum, the entire building is on fire. He actually goes so far as to pull the shutter down and be like, I must be crazy. Pull it back up, still on fire, and calls the fire department for the fire. Um, so the quick stop burns down, and that transitions us from them working at the quick stop to them working at Moobies, which is a fast food restaurant in the same local area.
And Kevin Smith does something really unique here that I wanna make sure, we touch on, which we talked about a little bit earlier, which is that transition from the black and white to the color.
Yeah.
Um, go ahead.
One of the coolest parts of it is when he pulls up the shutter and you see the fire, everything's still in black and white, but the fire is in color. And as they transition from the quick stop being burnt down to them working at movies, we see the color fade in.
Yes, and it kind of represents this transition in their lives from this, like, period of black and white to, like, kind of what seems like a little bit of color because Dante's life is changing. He's gonna get married, he's gonna move to Florida, he's leaving everything behind, and, it's he's in a very different spot than he was in the first Clerks, and as you can see, it like, that the movie kinda represents that with the change to color. But, spoiler, as we'll talk about the ending later, there's another transition back to the black and white that works very, very well. Um, but I love the way that Kevin Smith kind of uses the color in this one.
Yeah. It's very nice as a like because it starts out and it's like, oh, it's in black and white still, and then you see that transition after the fire. And then I love the song that plays for like the morning commute. It's hilarious. The as they're just going by a bunch of different like restaurants, as it's just casually referencing them in the lyrics.
Yeah, there goes a Wendy's, and it's like they're passing one. It's so funny. Uh, I really like the expanded cast in this. I like Rosario Dawson a lot. I would say that her chemistry with Dante is like some of the best I've ever seen on screen between two characters. I love their chemistry. Like especially on the roof when they're dancing together.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite scenes in the movie. Um, I also like Elias quite a bit, which is would you like to introduce Elias?
Yeah, Elias is a 19-year-old that is obsessed with Transformers and Lord of the Rings, uh, who is constantly harassed by Randy throughout the movie.
I love Randall in this movie because he just like has completely ripped off the bandage of, like, giving a fuck and is just an asshole from the start of the movie to the end. He one of the first things that we see him doing is he's, like, on this blog post, like, insulting, like, a disabled person on their blog, and they're like, "Why are you doing that?" And he's like, I don't wanna listen to him bitch." And they're like, "You're at work." And he's just, like, at the work computer doing that. Um, I love the interactions with some of the customers. They continue that, like, irony. I love the way that they continue to have conversations while people are, like, moving through the store and then people or through the restaurant, sorry, and people will, like, join in. I've had
Yep.
that happen to me so many times where, like, I'm talking to somebody and then somebody, like, will just throw in, like, their opinion on it. It happens in the first movie too when they're talking about the construct or the Death Star,
Yeah. They're
contractor.
discussing the second Death Star being destroyed. They like killed a bunch of independent contractors.
Yes, and they're, like, discussing whether or not, like, that was something that should have been done, and then there's an independent contractor in the store, and he's like, "Actually, your personal politics comes into play on that." But I've had that happen to me. I had that happen to me the other day at one of my jobs. I was talking about the Mike Paul, Jesus Christ, Mike Tyson, Jake Paul fight, and all of a sudden this random dude just, like, manifested, was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah," and, like, gave his opinion on whatever and then walked away. I was
Yep.
like, "Okay."
The funniest thing about it too is like they're saying like they're talking about some of the most like off the wall random shit, and then someone's like, "Yeah, I have opinions on that."
Yeah, I love the pop culture discussions in the restaurant because that's something that, like, I've had at work many of times, and I love the, like, heated argument they get into over The Lord of the Rings. There's only one trilogy, and there's only one return, and it's not of the king, it's of the Jedi. Like, it's just I don't know, I love the way that Kevin Smith writes the dialogue in both of the Clerks movies because
Yeah,
like I said, it's very snappy and quick, and it's also very realistic to how people communicate with one another.
yeah. I love Randy's like recreation of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Just kept
Yeah,
slowly walking through the restaurant.
and the one guy fucking A. Like, when he's eating the food. "May your first child be a masculine child." I love there's so many quotable lines in both of them, and I really think that, the second Clerks is overhated. I didn't talk to you very much about this. The consensus around the second Clerks is actually pretty negative.
Hmm. I
I,
can
um
I can partially understand that. It is a very it's a very different style of comedy from what the original is. It's or
It is.
not that it's different, it's more exaggerated and a little bit more raunchy.
Yeah, like, where the first one is, like, this indie, like, kind of, like, existential, like, cynical portrayal of retail work. The second one is kind of like it's still a realistic portrayal of fast food work, but it's also this very raunchy early 2000s comedy
Yeah.
that
It was kind of leaning into that same era as like the parody movies from that time.
absolutely, because they even do, like, several parody, like, sequences in the second Clerks, like, whenever Jay is referencing, like, Silence of the Lambs or whatever with
Yeah.
the, "Would you fuck me? I'd fuck me." Like, they do that quite a few times because the American Pie and the early 2000s parody movies were, like, in full swing with Scary Movie and that kinda thing.
Yeah.
So I do get, like, the kinda negative feelings about the second one to some extent, but I would also say that the second one has just as much heart as the first one.
I can agree with that.
Like, especially in terms of Dante's relationships, and I really like the way that the relationship develops between Dante and Randall, especially in the second one. And they both have that, like, stereotypical comedy moment, where the main characters fight or whatever right before the end of the movie, They have that in both, but I really, really like the way it plays out in the jail cell.
Yeah.
Um, Let me look at our notes real quick. So we talked already about the future of the Askew universe. Um, so for both of these movies, like for you, what would you say works and what would you say doesn't work? What do you think?
I'd say a large part of it is that down to earth kind of recreation of like real life events that you see in retail day to day, and stuff that you probably see in restaurants as well. But I think what doesn't work is some of the exaggeration. Like obviously, you're trying to do the whole like this is what retail's like, but some of the exaggeration can go a little bit too far, I would say. Um, in terms of, like it wouldn't play out like that. In this scenario, like it would end up differently.
Yeah, I could agree with that, especially in the second one, because there's a couple very exaggerated things that happen with customers in the second one. This whenever Wanda Sykes and her husband comes in,
Yeah.
uh, that entire sequence, probably the most famous sequence from the movie. It's very exaggerated. Um, and I would say that the donkey show in the
Yeah.
last 10-15 minutes is very exaggerated,
Like
though it is very
while
funny.
it is funny, it is not like I don't know. I can't tell if it really deserves a place in the movie or not to a degree because it's so just off the wall.
I'm Kiki Kelly. Or no, it's this is Kiki Kelly and I'm the sexy stud. Yeah, I could agree with that. It is like insanely exaggerated compared to some of the realism in the first one, but I don't know. I think that that is a product of the time that the second one came
Yeah.
out.
That's one of the things I wanted to talk about too was especially for the first one where it acts as a time capsule in a way to the 90s really. Uh because throughout the movie I was talking about this when we watched it. Randy goes around the first movie, like he'll pick up random magazines and just start reading, flipping through them, not really paying attention to what he's doing. And that just made me think that like nowadays, if you walk into a retail store, you're not going to see an employee just like flipping through a magazine. You're going to see them just sitting on their phone, like scrolling through TikTok or something stupid. It's like that change from the 90s to modern day where we're all on smartphones and physical stuff doesn't really like come up into our daily life as much as like I don't know. It takes you back to that moment. Also, the fact that Randy is able to sell cigarettes to a 4-year-old. That's
That does happen. Um, what I really, really like about the first movie and with that feeling of like capturing the 90s as you're talking about is it gives you this kind of grungy 90s feeling with the black and white and with the soundtrack and
yeah,
with the chapter titles for like with the very lazy like font because they didn't have a lot of money, so like whenever each chapter begins there's a chapter title, but it's like very low budget and you could tell that
yeah. I can
I
also
think
attest that for Dante, I have also woken up by falling out of a closet. um, where were we?
that is a great question. I was just pulling back up the notes to figure it out. So we were doing what works about the films and what doesn't. Um, and I do agree with that. Like capturing the 90s in this time capsule with the grunge black and white. And I think that the second one kind of captures the early 2000s comedy in that way too,
Yeah,
with like the very raunchy, over the top, like almost like I don't want to say like dirty humor, but it kind of is dirty humor a lot more in the second one.
yeah. It leans into more of the kind of sexualized jokes.
Yes, yes, definitely. Um, Clerks 3 is
It's a movie.
It's a movie that exists that I've seen. I don't even know if I want to go like super in depth into it. We didn't watch it for the podcast. I will just say that the ending of Clerks 2, um, as we talked about a little bit earlier, the color fades back into the black and white. Randall and Dante decide to reopen the Quick Stop together in the video store, and their lives start anew. And the color fades back into black and white, and they're happy with their place in life
It's
again.
like they're back to normalcy for them.
Yes. Yes, it's like this return to normalcy, and the third movie just kind of shits all over that. So it's bad. Speaking of shitting, shit or get off the pot is a line that Randall says in the first movie, and it's this is going
We're
to
getting
be like,
philosophical.
yeah, that's what I was wanting to try and figure out a way to broach this topic, but this is the deepest part of this episode. What does having a meaningful occupation mean? Like, one of my favorite lines in the movie is whenever he's talking about like how like a monkey could come in here and push buttons and do our job. You make it seem so much more epic than it actually is. Like, you're a fucking drone, dude. I love those lines because it just like it hurts a little bit, especially as somebody who has worked retail for as long as I have, and the first movie kind of poses this idea of, okay, you should, find this spot in life that you're comfortable with, but you need to find like something meaningful, like something worthwhile. You got to go to school, you got to do this, you got to shit or get off the pot, you got to take a hold of your life and do whatever. But the second movie really kind of takes this look at it as well. Is that way of life such a bad thing?
Right.
Is being
Especially that conversation that Dante and Randy have in prison in the second movie towards the end, where Randy kind of says like, you keep talking about wanting to move on, like start your life. You said that 11 years ago. For me, I was just happy working with my best friend.
Yeah, and it's the idea of, does a meaningful life mean that you have to be the guy that's going to go out there and cure cancer, or is a meaningful life just being able to say that you enjoyed your existence, you know? And I guess it's like a debate for a lot of people, because a lot of people are like, well, you obviously like you should want to go for the betterment of society in all terms and that kind of thing. But I don't know. I think that there's something to it that there's a happiness to just being comfortable with, where you are in life
Yeah.
at a
Uh,
certain point.
as long as, as long as you're able to live within your means without, overstepping or, struggling, as long as you're comfortable, does it really matter what you're doing?
Yeah. And I really like that, the idea of what a meaningful occupation really means. I and I don't know. We got a little existential there for a second, but I think that is something that a lot of people think about, like with any kind of career. I'm sure there's some office jobs that people have that are like, am I really useful to society in this job? I can't say that fucking word. But and I think that that's something that a lot of people like struggle with, and I would say that as long as you're making money enough to support yourself and enough to like feed yourself, and if you got to take care of other people, you're taking care of other people. I'd say that's all you got to do.
Yeah. As long as you're
That
able to, again, live comfortably, do
Yeah,
what you need to do, as long as you can find worth and happiness in it, then it's not meaningless.
yeah, that's what Europe's got right, man. That's we over here. live to work and they work to live. They got the shorter work weeks. They're more interested in the vacations other than work talk. One of the first things that if you go out with somebody, and I guess this is a rant now, but in America, if you go out with somebody, you meet somebody new, one of the first questions that they ask each other is, "What do you do?"
Yep.
That's not a thing in Europe. It's not that's a concern for later. You talk about
Yeah.
what you do.
That's the
You
thing
talk about
that's
what your interests are and what you like about life and, what you like to do for fun and your hobbies and that kind of thing. The parts of life that are supposed to be enjoyable, that's what they discuss. But here, the first thing that we feel the need to bring up is what we
occupation.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, what we do for money,
That's
not what we
the
like.
a big thing that's always bothered me is like, growing up really young in the US, somebody walks up to you and it's like, "Oh, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And it's like, "I'm 5. I don't fucking know."
Exactly. Exactly. I love what Bryan Cranston said, and I wish that people could do what he had suggested, like people do, but it's not financially feasible. Have you ever heard of like his theory on what you should do like once you graduate high school?
No.
He has like this theory that you should take 2 years off before you work, before you go to school, before you do anything, and just travel like to as many different places as
Yeah.
possible and just like
If that were
soak in as
if
much as
that
you
were
can.
feasible, I would love to do that, you know?
Yeah, that's what I mean. That we just we focus so much on what we do, and that's what I love about Clerks is they're at work, but they're also like they close the store to play hockey. They close the store to go to the wake.
Yep.
And like they got a funeral they got to go to and they're talking about Star Wars and they don't let themselves be lost by the job that they're in,
Yeah.
I guess.
Which is a big thing to, take to learn lessons from the past, look forward to the future but live in the present, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Um So, I guess before I kind of talk about the podcast updates and kind of start wrapping us up, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about for either of these movies?
I think we pretty much covered it. I mean, if anything, I hope that we just inspire somebody who maybe hasn't seen Clerks or Clerks 2 or maybe hasn't seen them in a while to either watch it for the first time or rewatch it.
And also, if you're somebody that is in a position in life where you're like, oh, my job is meaningless, or you can't find a job, and you think that you are meaningless because you can't find a job, that's not true. If you're breathing and eating and moving ahead with your life, that's what matters,
Yep. Just keep moving forward.
Absolutely, that's the important thing. For our podcast updates, make sure that you guys join the Discord, follow the Twitter, all that good stuff, to keep up with our future episodes. Our next episode is going to be covering Martin Scorsese. It's going to be the first episode in the Project Gimme Shelter that I had discussed at the start. We'll be looking at his first three feature films, which are Who's That Knocking at My Door, Boxcar Bertha, and Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. So, like, all pretty underground Martin Scorsese movies, not ones that are talked about much. But if you uh, can get the time or have the resources to view them before the next episode, definitely do yourself a favor and experience it for yourself before you listen to us rant about it for an hour and a half.
Yep. And just for anybody that's questioning what happened to that second Halloween special, don't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't know what that didn't happen.
If you heard us say anything about a part two or like a third Halloween special for this year, you must have misheard.
It's
It's
coming out on Christmas Day.
Yeah, it's like those horror movies that decide to drop in December instead of in October.
Yeah, just it's just very delayed.
Yep.
Um, but other than that, make sure you guys are joining the Discord, following everything, and thank you guys so much for watching, and listening if you're listening, wherever you're viewing the podcast on. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Yep. Also, no context, but we're taking it back.
You
Totally
can't just
kidding.
say
No, I'm
that.
kidding. We're not doing that. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. We appreciate any feedback that you guys give us. We appreciate if you guys join the Discord, anything like that. But that has been Mixed Media once again.
Take care, everyone.